do, you'll be grateful every day.
I find it really fascinating, the concept of the balance. When there's a great evil, a great good comes up, or when there's a great good, something's always balancing in your own life, and also on a micro level and on a macro level around the world. And it's really interesting. So then, in many ways, some of the things that are happening in the world today could be counterbalanced with all the good. And I think what you said was interesting, like the Ukraine is going through a lot right now, but I've never seen the massive support that I just never seen in my lifetime.
As one subsides, so will the other. It's called the law of heuristic escalation, if you want to study that. Mm-hmm. A law of heuristic escalation, Eris was discord, and so if you raise up disorder, order ensues. If you raise up order, disorder ensues. If a government tries to impose a new rule, a sanction, disorder occurs. If all of a sudden disorder occurs, order tries to come. And they both rise together, and they're both subjective biases and interpretations of reality. But the idea of the good and evil, this is another thing that we have. If we look in our amygdala, which is a subcortical area of our brain, it has a nucleus accumbens for pleasure, and it has a striatum and another area for pain. And so these two areas are involved in seeking prey and avoiding predator. So it's a survival desire center, that's that location. But it's also governed from above, from the executive function, which is a medial prefrontal cortex. And it governs and mitigates and calms down and dampens the volatilities of that reactor. And most people are caught in reaction. And believe it or not, this is going to shock people, but morality comes from that reactionary center, not the executive center. Morality is a subjective bias interpretation of our existence. We label something good only when we don't see the downsides. We label something bad only when we don't see the upsides. And one person's heaven is another person's hell, as John Milton said. But the fact is that it's neither until somebody with a narrowed mind labels it such. I was involved in mediating a conflict between 5 Israeli leaders and 3 Palestinian leaders. And I had the first moment I walked in there, one of the Israeli leaders put their hand up and said, "Dr. Demartini, I have a question for you before we begin this." He said, "Do you believe in absolute evil?" And I said, "No." "Well, I do." And I said, "Is it possible that's why for 14 years you've been trying to mediate something and got nowhere? Because what you're considering evil, you're trying to change. You're trying to get somebody else to live in your values. And if you do, you will get nowhere." And they calmed down for a second. And I then turned to them and I said, "What do you call absolute evil?" And they said, "Intolerance." Now, it was very obvious that they were being intolerant at the time, but they were blind to their own reality. And we only judge other people when they remind us of parts of ourselves we haven't loved and haven't integrated and owned in our lives. And that's as old as we can trace in history that's been known. So I said, "So well, you're saying intolerance is it? Okay, great." I said, "Now go to a moment when you've been intolerant in your life." "I'm never intolerant. I pride myself on never being intolerant. I'm very tolerant. Everybody I know knows I'm intolerant. I would never be intolerant. I'm always tolerant." And I said, "Well, that's interesting because I look at my life and I have all sides. I have moments of tolerance and moments of intolerance. Let me give you some of my intolerances. I've been intolerant at airports. I've been intolerant in hotels. I've been intolerant with food in restaurants. I've been intolerant with salespeople. I've been intolerant with my girlfriend, my kids, my that." And I listed about 50 intolerances, bam, to broaden her perspective of where her intolerances were.